Copper's first case.
Solving crime, one paw print at a time. Paws and Alibis, Book 05. By Wynne Valentine.
Chapter 1. Morning rituals and unexpected calls. The whining started at exactly 6:30 a.m., as it had every morning for the past 2 weeks. Ruby Castellano, Rue to everyone who didn't want to get on her bad side, cracked one eye open and glared at the red dachshund puppy sitting by her bedroom door. "Copper, we've discussed this. Civilized creatures sleep until at least 7. The puppy's response was to paw at the door and whine louder, his silky red coat catching the early morning sunlight streaming through the cottage's bay window. His dark eyes held that particular combination of urgency and determination that Rue had come to recognize meant business. "Fine, but I'm blaming you when I need 3 cups of coffee to function like a human being." She rolled out of bed, her bare feet hitting the cool hardwood floors of the beach cottage she'd impulsively rented sight unseen. 2 weeks in paradise, and her most meaningful conversations were with a dachshund. Fantastic. Copper bounced toward the back door the moment she appeared in the living room, his little legs working overtime to express his enthusiasm. The cottage was still a maze of unpacked boxes, her old life from up north crammed into cardboard containers that seemed to multiply when she wasn't looking. A stack labeled kitchen stuff served as an impromptu coffee table, while winter clothes, had become Copper's favorite napping spot. "You know, buddy," she said, opening the door to let him out onto the screened porch, "when I said I wanted a fresh start, I didn't expect it to include a 6:30 a.m. potty schedule." Copper ignored her commentary and trotted out to investigate the small patch of grass beyond the porch, tail wagging like a furry metronome. Rue leaned against the doorframe, taking in the view that still caught her off guard every morning. The cottage sat just close enough to the water that she could see glimpses of Pelican Cove's harbor through the palm trees, boats bobbing gently in the early morning calm. She'd found this place during her post-divorce internet spiral. 3 days after signing the papers, she'd put her Chicago condo on the market and started Googling places where winter doesn't exist. Pelican Cove had caught her eye. Small enough to avoid crowds, big enough to have decent Wi-Fi. Perfect for someone whose biggest life goal was becoming invisible. Copper finished his morning routine and bounded back toward the porch. But instead of heading inside, he made a beeline for the corner where Rue kept her flip-flops. He grabbed one in his teeth and looked at her expectantly. "Oh, come on! It's not even 7 yet!" The puppy's response was to drop the flip-flop at her feet and sit, his expression managing to convey both patience and the clear expectation that she would comply with his request. Rue sighed and slipped her feet into the sandals. "You know what? Fine. Let's go pretend we're the kind of people who take morning walks on the beach. But I'm drawing the line at yoga poses and green smoothies." 20 minutes later, she was beginning to understand why people made such a big deal about Florida sunrises. The harbor was painted in shades of pink and gold, and the air had that clean, salty smell that her Chicago lungs were still getting used to. Copper trotted beside her, occasionally stopping to investigate interesting smells or chase the small sandpipers that skittered along the water's edge. They were heading back toward the cottage when Copper suddenly stopped, his head tilted in that way that meant he'd heard something she'd missed. A moment later, she heard it too, the distant sound of her phone ringing from inside the house. Probably a telemarketer, she told him, but picked up her pace anyway. The phone was still ringing when she reached the porch, and Copper seemed to think this warranted immediate attention. He pawed at the screen door and looked at her urgently. All right, I'm getting it." The caller ID showed a local number she didn't recognize. She almost let it go to voicemail. Half the point of moving to Florida was escaping phone calls. But curiosity won. "Hello? Is this Ruby Castellano? The graphic designer? Depends on who's asking." "Oh, thank goodness. This is Betty Sullivan from the Pelican Cove Veterinary Clinic.
I got your number from your rental application. I hope you don't mind. I know your little dachshund is due for his shots, and we've had a cancellation this morning if you'd like to bring him in." Rue looked down at Copper, who was sitting at her feet, and somehow managing to look both angelic and guilty at the same time. She'd been putting off finding a local vet, along with most of the other tasks involved in actually settling into her new life. "I suppose I should take care of that," she said. "What time? Could you be here by 10? Dr. Torino is wonderful with puppies, and I know Copper will just love him." Rue glanced at the clock on her microwave. 8:45. "Sure, I can make that work." "Oh, wonderful. We're right on Harbor Street, next to the bookstore. You can't miss us. We have the big sign with the cartoon cat." After hanging up, Rue looked down at Copper, who was now wagging his tail as if he'd understood every word of the conversation. "Well, looks like you're getting your shots today, buddy. Try to contain your excitement." Copper's response was to run to his leash and bring it back to her, dropping it at her feet with the same expectant expression he'd used with the flip-flop. She spent the next hour getting ready, which mostly involved finding clothes that weren't wrinkled from being crammed in boxes and attempting to make her hair look like something other than she'd been electrocuted. Copper supervised from his perch on the unmade bed, occasionally offering commentary in the form of small woofs when she held up different outfits. "The blue sundress, really? I was thinking more along the lines of, I'm a responsible pet owner rather than I'm trying to impress the veterinarian." Copper tilted his head and gave her what she'd come to recognize as his "you're overthinking this" look. "Fine, the blue sundress it is, but if Dr. Torino turns out to be some creepy old guy who collects stuffed animals, I'm blaming you." By 9:30, they were walking down Harbor Street, Copper trotting proudly beside her like he owned the place. The morning was already warming up, but the ocean breeze kept it from being uncomfortable. Rue found herself taking in details she'd missed during her previous quick trips to town. The way the Spanish moss draped from the oak trees, the cheerful colors of the shop fronts, the easy way people waved at each other from across the street. It was exactly the kind of small-town atmosphere she'd been hoping for when she'd made her impulsive move south. The question was whether she could actually bring herself to become part of it, or if she'd end up being the antisocial hermit who lived in the cottage at the end of the street and only emerged to stock up on groceries and dog food. "What do you think, Copper?" she asked as they approached the veterinary clinic. "Think I can manage to interact with other humans without completely embarrassing myself?" Copper looked up at her with the kind of confidence that suggested he had complete faith in her ability to function like a normal person. Either that, or he was just excited about the prospect of meeting new people who might give him treats. "Your optimism is both touching and completely misplaced," she told him. "But let's give it a shot." Chapter 2. The Vet Visit. Pelican Cove Veterinary Clinic occupied a cheerful yellow building that looked like it had been designed by someone who believed that healthcare should feel welcoming rather than sterile. The cartoon cat on the sign was indeed impossible to miss, a smiling orange tabby that seemed to be waving at passers-by. Copper immediately perked up when they walked through the front door, his nose working overtime to process all the new smells. The waiting room was decorated in shades of blue and sandy beige, with nautical touches that managed to avoid crossing into full-blown theme restaurant territory. "You must be Ruby." The receptionist had silver hair and the kind of warm smile that made Rue immediately suspicious. People in Chicago weren't this friendly unless they wanted something. "Rue, please. And this is Copper." "Oh, he's adorable." Betty came around from behind the desk to get a better look. "Dr. Torino is just finishing up with another patient, but he'll be right with you. Can I get you some coffee? We just made a fresh pot." "That would be great, thanks." Betty returned to her desk and launched into the kind of cheerful chatter that required zero participation from Rue. "Perfect. You picked a wonderful time to move to Pelican Cove. The weather's been just perfect, and the tourist season is winding down. so you'll get to meet all the locals before the snowbirds start arriving in November. Dr. Torino grew up here, you know. His family's been in the area for generations. Such a nice young man, and so good with the animals.
The door opened, and out walked a guy who looked like he'd stepped off a Florida tourism poster. Sun-bleached hair, khakis, flip-flops. If Central Casting needed a laid-back beach vet, they'd found their guy. Mrs. Hendricks, remember what we discussed about Whiskers and the catnip? Moderation is key. I know, but he gives me such looks when I put the container away. They're very good at that. I'll see you next month for his checkup. After Mrs. Hendricks left, he turned to Rue with a smile that was probably illegal in several states. Sorry about that. Mrs. Hendricks thinks Whiskers is plotting against her. Could be right. That cat has serious attitude. You must be Copper's mom. I'm Jake Torino. Rue stood, Copper still in her arms, and tried to ignore the fact that Jake Torino had the kind of warm brown eyes that belonged in a romance novel. This was definitely not what she'd expected from a small-town veterinarian. Ruby Castellano. Rue. And yes, this is Copper. Jake immediately focused his attention on the puppy, who seemed to sense that this was someone who understood dogs. Copper's tail started wagging so hard, his entire back end wiggled. Well, hello there, handsome. You're going to be a big boy, aren't you? Jake's voice took on that special tone that dog people used, and Copper responded by trying to lick his face. How old is he? The shelter thought about 4 months. I got him right before I moved down here. Smart timing. Puppies are great conversation starters. Works better than my usual opening line about intestinal parasites. Jake's smile suggested he was only half joking. Why don't we head back to room 2 and get him checked out? The examination room was as cheerful as the waiting area, with a mural of dolphins painted on one wall, and an examination table that looked more like furniture than medical equipment. Jake's manner was professional but relaxed, and Rue found herself answering his questions without the usual wariness she felt around new people. So you moved here from up north? Chicago area, I'm guessing, from the accent. Good ear. And yes, I'm one of those people who decided Florida winters sounded better than Illinois ones. Can't say I blame you. I went to vet school at Auburn, and even Alabama winters felt brutal after growing up here. Jake ran his hands over Copper with the confidence of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. He's in great shape. The shelter did good work with him. That's a relief. I have to admit, I'm pretty new to the whole dog ownership thing. You're doing fine. He looks happy and healthy, and that's what matters. Jake was preparing a syringe when he paused. Betty, could you grab me a... He was interrupted by the sound of the front door chiming, followed immediately by Betty's voice raised to a level that suggested either excitement or panic. Dr. Torino! Oh, Dr. Torino! You need to come quick. Jake set down the syringe and looked at Rue apologetically. Sorry, Betty doesn't usually get this worked up unless it's an emergency. Let me just... The examination room door burst open without ceremony, and Betty practically stumbled through it, her face flushed and her eyes wide. Dr. Torino, thank goodness you're here. I have Mrs. Delacroix on the phone, and she's absolutely hysterical. Princess is missing. Jake's expression shifted to professional concern. Missing? When did she notice? This morning. She went to feed Princess her breakfast, and she was just gone. Mrs. Delacroix is beside herself. She's on her way over now, but I thought you should know. Betty, slow down. Jake's voice was calm and reassuring. Has she checked all of Princess's usual hiding spots? Cats are notorious for finding new places to nap. That's just it. Princess never leaves the screened porch. Never. Mrs. Delacroix says she's the most pampered cat in Florida, and she wouldn't know what to do outside. Rue found herself leaning forward in her chair, Copper forgotten in her lap. Princess? Betty turned to her, as if suddenly remembering she was there. Oh, Princess is Mrs. Delacroix's Persian cat. She's quite famous, you know,
She has her own Instagram account with 50,000 followers. She's been featured in the tourism brochures and everything. Princess of Pelican Cove, they call her.
Cat with an Instagram account? Rue said slowly. Of course.
Jake caught her tone and smiled. Welcome to small-town Florida. We take our local celebrities seriously, even the four-legged ones.
Before Rue could respond, the front door chimed again, and the sound of rapid footsteps approached the examination room. A woman's voice, heavily accented and clearly distressed, echoed down the hallway.
Betty! Betty, where's the doctor? I need the doctor right now!
In here, Mrs. Delacroix, Betty called back. The woman who appeared in the doorway was exactly what Rue had expected from Betty's description, elderly, well-dressed, and currently in a state of dramatic distress that would have been impressive on a soap opera. Her silver hair was perfectly styled despite her obvious agitation, and her jewelry suggested someone who'd never had to worry about money.
Dr. Torino, thank God you're here. Princess is gone. My baby is gone. Mrs. Delacroix's accent was a charming mix of French and Canadian that would have been delightful under different circumstances. I have searched everywhere, everywhere. She would never leave her porch, never.
Jake moved toward her with the same calm manner he'd used with Copper.
Mrs. Delacroix, I need you to take a deep breath and tell me exactly what happened. When did you last see Princess?
Last night at bedtime. She always sleeps on her little pink bed next to my chair.
But this morning... Mrs. Delacroix pulled a tissue from her purse and dabbed at her eyes. The porch door was open. The screen was damaged. Someone has taken her.
The screen was damaged?
Jake's expression grew more serious. What kind of damage? Cut! There was a small hole cut in the screen right near the latch. Princess could have squeezed through, but she's never shown any interest in the outside world. She's perfectly content on her porch with her toys and her followers.
Her followers? Rue couldn't help asking. Mrs. Delacroix turned to her with the expression of someone explaining something obvious to a child.
Princess has over 50,000 followers on Instagram. She's quite famous. People come from all over just to see her. She's featured in the Pelican Cove Welcome Center brochures and the Chamber of Commerce website. She's a local treasure.
Right, Rue said, glancing at Jake.
A local treasure.
Jake appeared to be taking the situation completely seriously, which Rue found oddly charming.
Mrs. Delacroix, have you called the police?
Police?
Mrs. Delacroix looked aghast. For a missing cat? They would think I'm a foolish old woman.
You're not foolish, Jake said gently. Princess is important to you, and she's important to the community. But let's start by organizing a search. Betty, could you call some of the regular volunteers? And Mrs. Delacroix, I think we should take a look at your porch.
Oh, would you? I would be so grateful.
Rue found herself standing up, Copper still in her arms.
I could help look. I mean, Copper and I don't have any other plans this morning. Mrs. Delacroix turned to her with an expression of such gratitude that Rue immediately felt guilty for her earlier sarcasm. Oh, would you? That would be wonderful. Every set of eyes helps.
Jake looked at her with surprise and what might have been approval.
That's very kind of you. We should probably finish Copper's shots first, though.
Of course, Mrs. Delacroix waved her hands.
I'll wait in the front room and call some of my neighbors. Princess has so many friends in the community. After she left, Jake resumed preparing Copper's vaccines. You know, you don't have to help, he said quietly. Mrs. Delacroix can be intense about
Rue looked down Copper, who seemed to be listening to their conversation with unusual attention.
Well, we're new here. Might as well start participating in the local drama, right?
Local drama, Jake repeated, smiling. I like that. Most people call it community spirit.
Tomato.
Jake finished giving Copper his shots quickly, and the puppy barely flinched. He's a brave little guy. You can bring him back in a month for his next round.
Assuming we're not too busy with our new career as pet detectives, Rue said, then immediately wondered why she'd said that. She was supposed to be keeping things light and impersonal, not making jokes that suggested she planned to stick around. Jake's smile suggested he'd caught the implication. Pet detectives, Jake repeated, grinning. I like it. Though, fair warning, most of my cases involve cats who aren't actually missing, just hiding under beds because they're mad about bath time. As they prepared to leave the examination room, Rue found herself thinking about Mrs. Delacroix's distress and the mysterious hole in the screen. Despite her intention to avoid getting involved in local affairs, she was genuinely curious about what had happened to Princess. So, she said to Copper as they walked toward the waiting room, looks like we're about to investigate our first missing pet case. Try not to let it go to your head. Copper's response was a small woof that sounded suspiciously like agreement. Great, Rue thought. Day 14 in paradise, and I'm getting sucked into a missing cat case. This should be interesting. Chapter 3. The crime scene. 20 minutes later, Rue found herself following Jake's pickup truck through one of Pelican Cove's more upscale neighborhoods, where the houses sat on larger lots and the landscaping looked like it required a team of professionals to maintain. Copper rode shotgun in a rental car, his nose pressed to the window as he took in all the new sights and smells. You know, buddy, she said, taking a left turn behind Jake, when I imagined getting involved in the local community, I was thinking more along the lines of a book club or maybe a yoga class, not a missing cat investigation. Copper turned to look at her with an expression that seemed to say, where's your sense of adventure? Easy for you to say. You're not the one who just volunteered to help a dramatic French-Canadian woman find her Instagram-famous cat. Mrs. Delacroix's house screamed money. The kind of pristine white stucco that required a full-time maintenance crew. The driveway alone was bigger than Rue's first apartment. Jake was already out of his truck when Rue pulled up, and he waited for her to join him before approaching the house. Mrs. Delacroix appeared at the front door before they could knock, her face still showing signs of distress, despite her obvious efforts to compose herself. Dr. Torino, thank you so much for coming. And you too, dear, she added, turning to Rue. I'm afraid I didn't catch your name at the clinic. Ruby Castellano. Rue. And this is Copper. Ah, what a lovely boy. Mrs. Delacroix bent to pet Copper, who immediately charmed her with his most winning puppy expression. Princess would have loved him. She's always been so social, you know. That's part of what makes her Instagram account so successful. The living room looked like a magazine had exploded. Everything was perfect, spotless, and Rue counted at least 12 framed photos of Princess scattered around. This cat had better publicity shots than most actors. This is quite a shrine, Jake observed, examining a professional portrait of Princess, wearing what appeared to be a tiny tiara. Princess is very photogenic, Mrs. Delacroix said proudly. That particular photo was taken for last year's Christmas campaign with the Chamber of Commerce. She wore that crown for the Royal Christmas in Pelican Cove promotion. The screened porch was bigger than Rue's living room and looked like a cat paradise or prison, depending on your perspective. Custom cat tree, professional lighting setup, enough toys to stock a pet store. She had her own Instagram photo studio set up, Mrs. Delacroix explained, gesturing toward a corner where professional lighting equipment surrounded a small velvet cushion. Maya, the young girl who manages her account, comes by twice a week for photo shoots. But it was the damaged screen that caught Rue's attention. The hole was exactly as Mrs. Delacroix had described, a deliberate cut near the latch, just large enough for a cat to squeeze through. Someone definitely cut this, Jake confirmed, examining the edges of the hole. The cut is too clean to be accidental damage. Copper had immediately started sniffing around the porch, his nose working overtime as he investigated various scents. He paused near Princess's food bowls, then moved toward the damaged screen with obvious interest. Look at that, Rue said. watching Copper's behavior. "He's following some kind of trail." Mrs. Delacroix wrung her hands. "Princess's breakfast is still untouched. She never misses a meal, never. She has her salmon pâté at exactly 7 every morning." Who studied the scene? Food bowls full. No knocked over furniture. No signs of a fight. Whatever happened here, Princess hadn't put up a struggle. "Mrs. Delacroix," she said slowly, "you mentioned Princess is microchipped?" "Oh, yes, of course. She's a purebred Persian, worth nearly $3,000. The microchip was essential for insurance purposes." Jake looked up from where he was examining the screen door. $3,000? That's quite valuable. "Princess comes from champion bloodlines," Mrs. Delacroix said with obvious pride. "Her grandfather was a national cat show winner. Of course, Princess was never interested in showing. She much preferred her modeling career." Copper had wandered outside through the hole in the screen and was now sniffing round the pool area with intense concentration. Rue followed him, curious about what had caught his attention. "Find something interesting, detective?" she asked. That's when she saw it. A pink rhinestone collar lying in the grass near the pool deck, partially hidden by a palm frond. "Mrs. Delacroix," she called, "is this Princess's collar?" The older woman hurried over, gasping when she saw the collar. "Yes, that's her favorite one. The pink rhinestones spell out Princess. But why would it be out here? She never takes it off." Jake joined them, frowning as he examined the collar. "Someone removed this deliberately. Cats can strangle if their collars catch on something while they're trying to escape. Whoever took Princess knew enough about cats to remove her collar safely." "But why would someone steal Princess?" Mrs. Delacroix's voice was plaintive. "She's never hurt anyone. She brings joy to so many people through her social media presence." Rue found herself thinking about the careful way the screen had been cut, the untouched food, and the safely removed collar. This wasn't the work of someone who wanted to hurt the cat. Quite the opposite. "Mrs. Delacroix," she said, "has Princess had any problems with other animals in the neighborhood? Or maybe someone who wasn't happy about her fame?" "Problems? Princess? Never." Mrs. Delacroix looked scandalized by the suggestion. "She's beloved by everyone. Well, except for Harold Pine next door, but he complains about everything. He's always grumbling about cats using his garden as a litter box. But Princess never leaves the porch." "Harold Pine?" Jake looked interested. "The retired guy with the pristine lawn?" "The very one. He's threatened to do something about the neighborhood cats more than once, though I always assumed he was all talk." Copper had continued his investigation and was now heading toward the side of the house that bordered Pine's property. His body language suggested he was following a definite scent trail. "Your dog seems to think he's found something," Mrs. Delacroix observed. "He's got good instincts," Rue said, though she realized she was still learning what Copper was capable of. They'd only had 2 weeks together, after all. Jake was still examining the collar when his phone buzzed. He glanced at it and frowned. "Betty's texting. She says Maya Santos, the girl who manages Princess's Instagram, wants to talk to us. Apparently there's something about the account we should know." "Oh, Maya is such a sweet girl," Mrs. Delacroix said. "She's been managing Princess's social media for almost a year now. She has such a gift for capturing Princess's personality in photos." Rue looked at Copper, who had completed his circuit of the backyard and was now sitting by the pool, tail wagging slightly. "Well, detective," she said to him, "what's your professional opinion?" Copper tilted his head and gave a small woof, which Rue chose to interpret as, "We need more information." "I agree. Mrs. Delacroix, would it be all right if we went to talk to Maya? She might know something about Princess's routine, or if there were any recent changes." "Of course! Anything that might help find my baby." As they prepared to leave, Rue found herself taking one last look around the pristine porch and backyard. Someone had definitely taken Princess,
but the care they'd shown in cutting the screen and removing the collar suggested this wasn't a random act of cruelty. The question was, who in Pelican Cove would want to steal the most famous cat in town? "Come on, Copper," she said, clipping on his leash. "Let's go interview our first witness." Copper wagged his tail and trotted toward the car, apparently ready for the next phase of their investigation. Chapter 4. Following Leads. Harold Pine's house next door was the polar opposite of Mrs. Delacroix's. Every blade of grass the same height, every shrub trimmed to geometric perfection. The kind of yard that probably had its own maintenance schedule and definitely didn't welcome neighborhood cats. Harold himself looked like he'd been cut from the same cloth as his landscaping. Precise, tidy, and slightly intimidating. He answered his door, wearing gardening gloves and the expression of someone who'd been interrupted from important work. "If this is about that damn cat again," he started, then stopped when he saw Jake. "Oh, Dr. Torino. What can I do for you?" "Hi, Harold. This is Rue Castellano. She's new to town. We're looking for Princess. She went missing last night." Rue watched him carefully. "Mrs. Delacroix mentioned you've had some issues with Princess?" "Look, I don't have anything against the cat, but every morning I go out to water my roses and find surprises. I've tried everything, those motion sprinklers, that pepper stuff that's supposed to keep them away. Nothing works." "So you told Mrs. Delacroix you'd do something about it?" Harold shrugged. "I was frustrated. Maybe I said I'd call animal control or something, but I didn't hurt the damn cat." Copper had been sniffing around Harold's pristine garden border and suddenly froze, his nose working overtime at something near the property line. "When did you last see Princess?" Rue asked. "Yesterday evening, around dinner time. She was on that porch of hers, posing for more pictures. That girl was there with all her camera equipment." "Maya?" "That's the one. Sweet kid, but I don't understand this whole Instagram business. Taking pictures of the cat all day." Harold shook his head. "Different world, I guess." After they left Harold's house, Jake suggested they track down Maya Santos. "Betty mentioned she wanted to talk to us. Might be important." They found Maya at the local coffee shop, hunched over a laptop with her phone plugged into the wall. She was exactly what Rue expected from a teenage Instagram manager. Oversized sweater, messy bun, and the slightly frazzled look of someone managing a social media crisis. "Oh my God, thank you for coming." Maya looked up when Jake introduced them. "I don't know what to tell Princess's followers. She was supposed to have a new post this morning, and I can't exactly say she's missing without Mrs. Delacroix's permission." She turned her laptop screen toward them. Princess's Instagram account showed a professionally shot photo of the cat wearing a tiny sailor hat, posted yesterday at 6 p.m. The comment section was intense. "Look at this." Maya scrolled through the comments. "See this username, Cat Hater P? They've been leaving nasty comments for weeks. Really mean stuff." Rue leaned closer. The comments were definitely hostile, but they seemed more like typical internet trolling than actual threats. "Any idea who it is?" "The account's locked down pretty tight. But PC probably means Pelican Cove, right? And they know things about Princess's routine that only a local would know." "Like what?" Jake asked. Maya pulled up earlier posts. "See this comment from last week? That cat has never spent a day outside her precious porch. And this one, someone should teach Princess what real life is like." Creepy, right? Copper had been lying quietly at Rue's feet, but he suddenly got up and moved toward the coffee shop window, his attention focused on something outside. "What is it, boy?" Rue followed his gaze but didn't see anything unusual. Just the normal Harbor Street foot traffic. "He's been doing that a lot today," Jake observed. "Like he's tracking something." They were getting ready to leave when Tom Brennan walked in. Rue recognized him from Mrs. Delacroix's description: work clothes, tool belt, and the weathered hands of someone who made his living fixing things. "Hey, Dr. Torino. Heard about Princess."
That's a real shame.
Tom, this is Rue. She's helping us look for Princess. You've been working in that neighborhood lately, right? Yeah, been doing some repairs for the Hendersons 3 houses down from Mrs. Delacroix. Tom ordered his coffee and joined them at their table. Funny thing, actually, yesterday morning I saw this woman in a white car parked near Mrs. Delacroix's place. Thought it was odd because she just sat there for maybe 20 minutes, not getting out or anything. What kind of woman? Rue asked. Older lady, maybe 70s. Had gray hair. Looked kind of, I don't know, sad? Like she'd been crying. I noticed because she was just sitting there staring at the house. Did you see her leave? Yeah, eventually. But here's the weird part. She drove off toward the marina instead of back to the main road. Most people would take Harbor Street to get back to town. Copper's head snapped up at the word marina, and he moved to the door, clearly wanting to go outside. He keeps doing that, Rue said. Every time someone mentions the marina area, he gets interested. Jake stood up. Maybe we should listen to him. Dogs have better noses than we do. Outside the coffee shop, Copper immediately started walking in the direction of the marina, his nose to the ground. Not the excited, scattered sniffing of a puppy exploring, but the focused, determined tracking behavior Rue was starting to wreck. You really think he's following a scent? She asked Jake. Wouldn't surprise me. Dachshunds were bred for hunting. They're natural trackers. Maya had followed them outside, still clutching her laptop. This is like something out of a movie, a detective dog. Copper led them down Harbor Street toward the waterfront, pausing occasionally to check his trail but never losing focus. Whatever he was following, it was leading them away from the residential area and toward the collection of shops, restaurants, and boat docks that made up Pelican Cove's small commercial district. Jake, Rue said quietly, watching Copper work. The way someone removed Princess's collar, you said they knew about cats. Right. The collar could have strangled her if it caught on something while she was trying to escape. Someone who cared about her safety would remove it. So we're not looking for someone who wanted to hurt Princess. So it doesn't seem like it. But that doesn't mean she's okay. They were getting closer to the marina when Copper suddenly stopped at a small memorial garden tucked between 2 buildings. He sat down and gave a small woof, like he was announcing a discovery. What is it, Detective? She asked, crouching down beside him. That's when she noticed the flowers. The memorial garden was full of small blooms, carefully tended and obviously meant to honor someone's memory. But there were several spots where flowers had been recently picked. Clean cuts, not torn stems. Someone's been taking flowers from here, she said, pointing out the evidence to Jake. Memorial flowers, Jake said thoughtfully. Tom said the woman in the white car looked sad, like she'd been crying. Rue looked at the missing flowers, then at Copper, who was still sitting patiently, as if he'd done his job and was waiting for her to catch up. I think, she said slowly, we need to find out who's been visiting this garden. Chapter 5. The Discovery. Frank Morales, the cemetery groundskeeper, turned out to be a weathered man in his 50s who knew every flower in his garden by name. When they showed him one of the stems from the memorial garden, he nodded grimly. Someone's been taking the white roses. Started about 3 weeks ago. He gestured toward a section where the gaps were obvious once you knew what to look for. Always the white ones, cut clean, not torn. Whoever it is knows how to handle flowers. When Jean threw... Any idea who? Jake asked. Could be anyone. We get a lot of regular visitors, especially the older folks. There's one lady, comes by every few days since her cat died. Alina something. Lives over by the marina. Copper's ears perked up at the word marina, and he started pulling toward the harbor. He's doing it again, Rue said. Maya had been unusually quiet since they left the coffee shop, but now she looked up from her phone. Mrs. Delacroix just called. She wants to meet us wherever we're going. She's really upset." Copper led them toward the waterfront, pulling harder as they got closer to the marina. He trotted past the docks with his nose working overtime, clearly tracking something specific. He stopped dead near some tall grass and sat down, looking back at them with the weirdest expression Rue had ever seen on his face. "What is it, boy?" She pushed through the grass and stopped dead. Princess lay curled up in a small clearing, positioned as if she were sleeping. Someone had arranged her carefully on what looked like a small towel, and there was a single white rose tucked behind her ear. But her chest was rising and falling slowly. "Jake," Rue called quietly, "you need to see this." He pushed through the grass and knelt beside Princess. After a moment, he sat back on his heels. "She's alive, but barely. Her breathing's very shallow, and look at her eyes. Pupils are constricted, definitely drugged. Will she be okay?" "I think so. Someone gave her way too much of something. Probably sleeping pills." Jake carefully lifted Princess, still wrapped in the towel. "We need to get back to the clinic. Fast." Rue stared at the carefully positioned scene. The clean towel, the white rose. This doesn't make sense. If someone wanted to hurt Princess, why this? "Look at this setup," Jake said, cradling Princess protectively. "The towel, the flower. Someone didn't just dump her here." Mrs. Delacroix appeared through the grass a moment later, saw Princess in Jake's arms, and gasped. "My baby," Mrs. Delacroix whispered. "Is she—" "She's alive," Jake said quickly, "but we need to get her to my clinic immediately. Someone gave her something that's made her very sick." Mrs. Delacroix started crying, but with relief mixed in with the fear. "Will she be all right?" "I think so, but I need to treat her right away. The sooner we get the drugs out of her system, the better." They rushed to Jake's clinic, where he immediately started IV fluids and began treating Princess for drug poisoning. Mrs. Delacroix sat in the waiting room, still clutching the white rose that had been tucked behind Princess's ear. "Someone took care arranging all this," Rue said, studying the rose. "The flowers, the towel, making sure she was comfortable. But they still drugged her." "Whoever did this knew cats," Jake said, checking Princess's vital signs. "The way she was positioned, the care taken. This person has experience with animals. And fair warning, she's going to need to stay here overnight. But I think she'll make a full recovery." "But why would someone drug Princess and then arrange her so carefully?" Mrs. Delacroix asked. Maya had been taking photos with her phone, though she was careful to stay respectful. "Should I post something? I mean, people are going to ask questions when Princess doesn't show up online." Mrs. Delacroix thought for a moment. "Tell them Princess is at the vet's office, getting the best care possible. They'll understand." As they prepared to leave, Rue took one last look at Princess, now resting comfortably with IV fluids helping flush the drugs from her system. Someone had definitely taken Princess, but the care they'd shown in arranging her final scene suggested this wasn't a random act. The question was, who in Pelican Cove would drug the most famous cat in town and then give her what they thought was a beautiful goodbye? "Come on, Copper," she said, clipping on his leash. "We've got more investigating to do." Copper wagged his tail and trotted toward the car, apparently ready for the next phase of their investigation. Chapter 6. Following New Leads. That evening, Rue sat on her screened porch with a glass of wine, watching Copper investigate the same patch of grass he'd sniffed 17 times since they'd gotten home. The image of Princess so carefully arranged with that wilting white rose wouldn't leave her mind. "You know what bugs me most about this?" she said to Copper, who paused his investigation to look at her. "Someone loved Princess enough to give her what they thought was a proper goodbye, but they still killed her." Copper tilted his head, his way of saying, "Keep talking, I'm listening." "And another thing.
Why take flowers from a memorial garden? That's specific, personal. Someone who's dealing with their own loss, maybe?
This was exactly why she'd moved to Florida, to avoid getting involved. 2 weeks in paradise, and she was already talking to her dog like he was her therapist. Her phone rang, interrupting her one-sided conversation. Jake's name appeared on the screen. "Hey," she answered. "How are you holding up?" Rue looked out at the harbor, where the evening light was turning everything golden. "I keep thinking about her. Is that weird? It's been 1 day, and I never even met Princess when she was alive." "Not weird at all. You care about solving this. That's actually pretty great." "Don't get any ideas about my character development, Dr. Torino. I'm still planning to be a hermit. This is just a temporary lapse in judgment." "Right. Temporary hermit phase. I get it." Jake paused. "I've been thinking about those memorial flowers. Frank said someone's been taking white roses for about 3 weeks." "Same timeline as when Elena's cat died." "Exactly. And Tom saw an elderly woman in a white car. Elena Rodriguez lives over by the marina, Frank said." Rue sat up straighter. "You think she's our flower thief?" "Worth checking out. Want to take a drive over there tomorrow morning? Fair warning, though, I've got appointments starting early, but I can squeeze in an hour." "You'd close the clinic for this? For Princess? And for Mrs. Delacroix?" "Yeah. Besides, between you and me, I went to vet school dreaming of exotic animals and adventure. Reality is mostly intestinal parasites, and my cat's hiding under the bed. Is she missing? Calls." He chuckled. "A little actual mystery might be fun." Rue felt something warm and uncomfortable flutter in her chest. She pushed it away. "Well, when you put it like that, what time?" After they hung up, she looked down at Copper, who had abandoned his grass investigation and was now sitting at her feet with his most attentive expression. "Don't look at me like that," she told him. "This doesn't mean anything. We're just being good neighbors." Copper's tail wagged once, slowly, like he was humoring her. The next morning arrived gray and humid, with the kind of clouds that promised afternoon rain. Rue had barely finished her first cup of coffee when Jake's truck pulled into her driveway. Copper immediately ran to the door, tail wagging. "At least one of us is excited about this," she muttered, grabbing her keys. They drove through the quieter residential streets near the marina, past small houses with weathered siding and yards full of palm trees and bougainvillea. The area had a different feel from Mrs. Delacroix's upscale neighborhood. More working class, less manicured, but somehow more welcoming. "There," Jake said, pointing to a modest yellow cottage with a white sedan in the driveway. That could be the car Tom saw. The house looked tired. Not neglected exactly, but like someone had been going through the motions of maintenance without really caring about the results. The lawn was mowed but not edged, the flowers watered but not pruned. This was the house of someone just getting by. "Nervous?" Jake asked as they walked up the path. "Should I be?" "Well, we're about to ask an elderly woman some pretty personal questions about flowers and missing cats. Could go either way." "When you put it like that, it sounds terrible." "Could be worse. Yesterday I had to explain to Mr. Henderson why his backyard iguana doesn't need a wellness exam." The woman who answered the door looked exactly like Rue had expected from their investigation. Elderly, thin, with a kind of sadness in her eyes that spoke of recent loss. Her gray hair was carefully styled, but her clothes looked like she'd been wearing them for days. "Can I help you?" Elena Rodriguez's voice carried a slight Spanish accent and the wariness of someone who'd learned not to expect good news from unexpected visitors. "Mrs. Rodriguez? I'm Dr. Torino from the veterinary clinic. This is Rue Castellano. We're looking into the disappearance of a cat from the area." Elena's face went pale, and her hand tightened on the doorframe. A cat? Princess. She belonged to Mrs. Delacroix, a few streets over. Persian. Very beautiful. Someone took her from her screen porch the night before last. I
I don't know anything about that. But Elena's hands were shaking, and she wouldn't meet their eyes. Classic guilty behavior in Rue's limited experience with guilty people.
We know you've been dealing with a loss yourself, Jake said gently. Frank from the cemetery mentioned your cat passed away recently. Elena's composure cracked.
Duchess, 3 weeks ago. Kidney disease. Her voice broke on the last word.
Copper, who had been quietly sitting at Rue's feet, suddenly got up and walked toward Elena. Instead of his usual puppy enthusiasm, he approached slowly, almost carefully, and sat down directly in front of her. Elena looked down at him, and her eyes filled with tears. "She was beautiful," she whispered. "Just like Duchess. The same color, the same everything." Rue's stomach dropped. Oh shit. This wasn't going to be a simple case of teenage pranks. "Mrs. Rodriguez," she said carefully, "have you seen Princess before?" Elena glanced from Copper to Rue to Jake, clearly struggling with something. I drive by that neighborhood sometimes, on my way to places." "What kind of places?" Jake asked. "The cemetery, where Duchess is buried." Elena wiped her eyes. "I visit her every few days, take her flowers." "Memorial flowers?" Rue pressed. "Like the white roses from the garden by the marina?" Elena's face went even paler. I mean, those flowers were just sitting there, and Duchess loved white roses. Miguel used to bring them to her when she was sick." So Elena was definitely their flower thief. But was she also their catnapper? "Mrs. Rodriguez," Jake said, "we found Princess yesterday. She's dead." Elena gasped and grabbed the doorframe for support. "Dead? But she was so young, so healthy looking." "You did see her then," Rue said. It wasn't a question. Elena looked trapped. Yes. When I drove by. She looked so much like Duchess, I thought. For a moment, I thought, maybe." She shook her head. "I know how that sounds. Grief makes us think strange things sometimes." Elena nodded gratefully. "I used to sit in my car sometimes and watch her on that porch. She reminded me so much of Duchess when she was younger, before the kidney disease made her so thin." Rue watched Elena's face carefully. The woman was clearly devastated about Princess's death. But was it the devastation of someone who'd accidentally killed a cat? Or just someone who'd formed an attachment to a pet that reminded her of her own loss? "We should probably let you get back to your day," Jake said after an uncomfortable silence. Elena nodded, but she looked reluctant to close the door. Like she wanted to say more, but couldn't bring herself to do it. "Mrs. Rodriguez," Rue said on impulse, "if you think of anything that might help us figure out what happened to Princess, would you call us?" Elena's eyes filled with tears again. "Of course. She didn't deserve whatever happened to her." They were halfway back to Jake's truck when Copper suddenly stopped and looked back at Elena's house. She was still standing in the doorway, watching them leave, with an expression Rue couldn't quite read. "She knows something," Rue said quietly. "Yeah. Question is whether she'll tell us or if we need to come back." Copper whined softly, still focused on Elena's house, and tugged toward it instead of the truck. "Hey! What do you think, detective?" Rue asked him. "Should we go back now?" Jake glanced at his watch. "I've got appointments starting in 20 minutes, but we could come back this afternoon after she's had some time to process." Elena was still in the doorway, one hand on the doorframe like she was holding herself up. Whatever she was wrestling with, it was big. Chapter 7. The confrontation. Jake's afternoon appointments ran late, so it was almost 4 o'clock when they pulled back up to Elena's yellow cottage. The white sedan was still in the driveway, but the house felt different somehow. Quieter, like it was holding its breath. "She's been thinking about this all day," Ruth said, watching the curtains twitch in the front window. "Good or bad thing?"
With my luck, probably means she's had time to come up with a better story. But when Elena opened the door, she looked like she'd been crying for hours. Her eyes were red and swollen, and she was clutching a framed photo against her chest.
"I wondered when you'd come back," she said.
"We were hoping you might want to talk," Jake said. "Fair warning, we're not going anywhere until we understand what happened to Princess."
Elena nodded and stepped aside to let them in.
"I've been sitting here all day trying to figure out how to explain."
Holy shit. Rue had thought Elena's living room might be a little sad, but this was something else entirely. Photos of a Persian cat covered every surface. Professional shots, candid snapshots, even what looked like vacation pictures with Elena and an older man posing alongside the cat.
"This is," Rue started, then stopped. "What did you say to someone who turned their home into a museum for their dead pet?"
"A shrine," Elena finished. "I know how it looks. After Miguel died, Duchess was all I had left. She was our baby." The cat in the photos looked exactly like Princess. Not similar, identical. Same build, same coloring, same expression. If Rue hadn't known better, she'd have thought they were looking at pictures of the same animal.
"Duchess was beautiful," Jake said, picking up one of the frame photos.
13 years we had her.
Elena sank into a chair that clearly belonged to her. There was a depression in the cushion and a small blanket draped over one arm. "We got her as a kitten when Miguel and I were first married. She outlived him by almost 2 years. Copper had wandered over to a corner where a cat bed still sat, complete with toys arranged around it like Elena was expecting someone to come back and play with them. He sniffed carefully, then came back and sat down right in front of Elena's chair. "She died 3 weeks ago." Elena's voice cracked. "Kidney disease. The vet said there were treatments that might help, but they were expensive, and after Miguel's medical bills," she shook her head. "I had to watch her suffer because I couldn't afford to help her."
"I'm sorry," Rue said, and meant it.
This was getting worse by the minute. "I was driving to the cemetery on Wednesday morning. I go every few days to bring flowers to her grave." Elena looked down at the photo in her lap. The white roses, because Miguel used to bring them to her when she was sick. "I took a wrong turn and ended up on Mrs. Delacroix's street, and that's when I saw her."
"Princess!"
"She was on the porch, lying in exactly the same position Duchess used to lie in when she was sunbathing. And for just a moment I thought," Elena wiped her eyes, "I thought maybe Duchess had come back to me." Rue's stomach dropped. Oh no. I know how crazy that sounds, but grief makes you think impossible things. I sat in my car for almost an hour just watching her, and the longer I watched, the more convinced I became that it was some kind of sign. Jake leaned forward in his chair. "So you went back that night?"
Elena nodded, fresh tears starting.
"I just wanted to hold her. Just once. I told myself I'd put her right back, that no one would ever know. The screen was easy to cut. Miguel taught me how to use tools when we were fixing up this house."
"But she came with you," Rue said.
"That's what made it worse. She came right to me like she knew me. And when I held her," Elena's voice broke completely. "She purred exactly like Duchess used to." Elena stopped talking and just cried for a minute. Copper moved closer to her chair and put his head on her knee, and she reached down to pet him with shaking fingers. "I put her in my car and brought her here," Elena continued when she could speak again. "For maybe an hour I let myself pretend she was Duchess. I gave her Duchess's favorite treats, let her sleep in Duchess's—"
"But then you realized," Jake said gently.
"Then I realized what I'd done. This wasn't Duchess. Of course it wasn't. This was someone else's beloved pet, and I'd stolen her because I was so lonely and desperate that Elena looked up at them. "I'd completely lost my mind."
Rue felt her throat go tight.
Shit. This wasn't some psycho cat killer. This was just someone who missed her friends so much she'd completely cracked. I knew I had to return her, but I couldn't face Mrs. Delacroix. How could I explain what I'd done?
So what happened? Rue asked. Elena was quiet for a moment, stroking Copper's head. I gave her some of my sleeping pills, the ones my doctor prescribed after Miguel died. I thought if she was calm and sleepy, maybe I could sneak her back onto the porch and no one would know.
Jake leaned forward. How many pills did you give her?
2. They're very mild. They barely help me sleep anymore. But I didn't know... Elena started crying again. I didn't know cats process medication differently than people. She got so sleepy, and then she wouldn't wake up. I thought I'd killed her. But she's alive, Rue said gently. Jake treated her at the clinic. She's going to be fine. Elena looked up with desperate hope. She's really alive? Yes, Jake confirmed. She had a bad reaction to the medication, but she's going to be fine. Elena just started crying harder, but different now. I thought I killed her. Because I'm so pathetic I can't tell the difference between my dead cat and someone else's. What did you do then? Rue asked. I panicked. I thought she was dead, and I couldn't bear to just leave her somewhere terrible. So I took her to the place by the marina where Miguel and I used to walk Duchess when she was younger. I wrapped her in Duchess's favorite blanket and brought flowers from the cemetery. The white roses Miguel used to bring when Duchess was sick. You wanted to give her a proper goodbye, Jake said. Elena nodded miserably. I thought it was the least I could do after what I'd done. I arranged her so carefully, said a prayer, and then I couldn't bring myself to leave. I sat there crying until I heard you coming. Damn. Now Rue was getting emotional too. This whole thing was just heartbreaking. Elena, she said, using the woman's first name without thinking about it, we need to take you to see Mrs. Delacroix. Elena went white. She'll hate me. She'll call the police. Maybe. Or maybe she'll understand that you loved Princess too, even if it was only for one night. I can't face her. I can't tell her I killed her cat, because I missed my own so much. Jake stood up. Elena, you don't have a choice here. Mrs. Delacroix deserves to know what happened, and honestly, you deserve the chance to apologize. Fair warning, though, this conversation's going to be rough. Elena looked down at the photo of Duchess, then around at her living room, full of memories. Will they arrest me? I don't know, Rue said. But sitting here hiding won't make this better. Elena was quiet for what felt like forever, just petting Copper and staring at Duchess's picture. Then she stood up, still holding the frame. All right, I'll come with you. But I want to bring this picture so she can see so she can understand. As they headed for the door, Elena stopped and looked back at her living room one more time. I never meant to hurt anyone, she said. I just missed her so much. I know, Rue said. Let's just hope Mrs. Delacroix understands that too. Elena grabbed her purse with shaking hands, and Rue realized she had no idea how this was going to go. Mrs. Delacroix could be compassionate, or she could be furious. Either way, this was going to be one hell of a conversation. Chapter 8. Resolution and New Beginnings. The drive to Mrs. Delacroix's house was the longest 10 minutes of Rue's life. Elena sat in the back seat clutching Duchess's photo like a lifeline, while Copper had somehow wedged himself between the front seats to keep an eye on everyone. Jake drove with the kind of careful attention that meant he was as nervous as the rest of them. What if she screams at me? Elena whispered. Then she screams, Rue said. You'll survive it. What if she calls the police before I can explain? Then we'll deal with that too. Elena fell quiet, but Rue could see her hands shaking in the rearview mirror. This was either going to be a moment of beautiful forgiveness or a complete disaster.
In her experience, it was usually the disaster. Mrs. Delacroix answered her door wearing full makeup and a black dress, like she'd been preparing for Princess's funeral. When she saw Elena standing beside Jake and Rue, her expression shifted from hope to confusion to something sharper. "Who is this?" she asked, though her tone suggested she already suspected. "Mrs. Delacroix," Jake said carefully. "This is Elena Rodriguez. She has something to tell you about Princess." Mrs. Delacroix stepped back to let them into her immaculate living room, where Princess's photos seemed to watch from every surface. Elena looked around with obvious pain, still clutching Duchess's picture. "She was beautiful," Lena said quietly, looking at a professional portrait of Princess, wearing a tiny pearl necklace. "So much like my Duchess." "What do you know about my Princess?" Mrs. Delacroix's voice was controlled, but Rue could see the tension in her shoulders. Elena clutched the photo of Duchess tighter. "I took her," she said simply. "I'm the one who cut your screen and took Princess." Mrs. Delacroix sank into her chair like her legs had given out. "You? But why? Princess never hurt anyone. She brought joy to thousands of people." "She looked like Duchess." Elena's voice was barely audible. "My cat died 3 weeks ago, and when I saw Princess, for a moment I thought maybe she was Duchess. Come back to me." "That's ridiculous!" Mrs. Delacroix's accent thickened with emotion. "Princess was a registered Persian with documented bloodlines. She was worth thousands of dollars." "I know," Elena said, tears streaming down her face. "I know how it sounds, but I was so lonely, and the grief, it made me think impossible things." Rue watched Mrs. Delacroix's face cycle through anger, confusion, and something that might have been recognition. This could go either way fast. "You lost your cat 3 weeks ago?" Mrs. Delacroix asked. Elena nodded. "Kidney disease. I took her to a vet in Tampa. He said there might be treatments, but they were expensive. I couldn't afford them after Miguel's medical bills. I had to watch her suffer because I didn't have enough money." Mrs. Delacroix was quiet for a long moment, looking from Elena to the photos of Princess surrounding them. "Tell me what happened to my Princess," she said finally. Elena told the story again. The desperate decision to take Princess, the night spent pretending Duchess was alive, the sleeping pills that were meant to calm but instead killed. "I never meant for her to die," Elena whispered. "I loved her for that one night as much as you loved her for her whole life." Mrs. Delacroix was crying now too, but quietly. "She could have died." "But she didn't," Jake said firmly. "The medication made her very sick, but she's going to be fine. She's actually recovering faster than I expected." "And you arranged her so carefully by the marina." Elena nodded. "With flowers from the cemetery. I thought she was dead, and I wanted her to have the kind of goodbye I couldn't give Duchess. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Copper, who had been lying quietly by the door, got up and moved to the space between their chairs, like he understood that both women needed comfort. "I should call the police," Mrs. Delacroix said, but her voice lacked conviction. "You could," Rue said carefully, "but that won't bring Princess back. And Elena didn't do this out of cruelty." Mrs. Delacroix looked at Elena, who was still clutching the photo of Duchess. "Show me," she said. Elena looked confused. "Show you what?" "Picture. Show me your Duchess." Elena held out the framed photo with shaking hands. Mrs. Delacroix studied it for a long moment, then looked around at all the photos of Princess. "Mon Dieu," she breathed. "They could be sisters." "I know it doesn't excuse what I did." "No," Mrs. Delacroix interrupted. "It doesn't excuse it, but it explains it." She was quiet for another moment. "After my Henri died, Princess was my whole world. I don't know what I would have done if I'd lost her the way you lost Duchess." Elena looked up with surprise. "You lost your husband, too?" 2 years ago. Heart attack. Mrs. Delacroix's voice softened. Princess was all I had left of the life we built together. Henri gave her to me for our anniversary, you know.
Miguel gave me Duchess for my birthday, Elena whispered. 13 years ago. The two women looked at each other across the space between their chairs, and Rue could see something pass between them. Two widows who'd both lost everything that mattered. You can't undo what happened, Mrs. Delacroix said finally, but Princess is alive and will recover, and you can help me with something. Elena looked confused. How? Mrs. Delacroix was quiet for a moment, looking around at all the photos of Princess. I've been thinking you need a companion of your own. Not to replace Duchess, but to help you heal. And I'd like to help you get one. I don't understand. Let me buy you a kitten, Mrs. Delacroix said simply. Let me help you choose one, and train her, and love her. Princess will have her life back, and you'll have someone new to care for. Elena stared at her. You want to buy me a kitten? After what I did? You took Princess because you were grieving, Mrs. Delacroix said. You thought she was gone, and did right by her. That says something about your heart. Elena was crying again, but differently now. I can't afford the vet bills. If something goes wrong, I'll help with that too, Mrs. Delacroix said. Consider it Princess's gift to you. She brought us together. After all. Jake cleared his throat. Mrs. Delacroix, are you saying you don't want to press charges? Mrs. Delacroix looked at Elena for a long moment. What good would that do? Princess is alive and will recover fully. But maybe, if we work together, we can help you heal by giving you someone new to love. You would do that? Elena asked. After what I did to you? Grief makes us do desperate things sometimes, Mrs. Delacroix said. But it doesn't have to make us cruel people. Huh. Maybe small towns weren't all gossip and judgment after all. There is one condition, Mrs. Delacroix added. Elena tensed. What? Maya will help us document the new kitten's life on social media. Princess had thousands of followers who loved her. They deserve to see that love can continue, even after loss. Elena smiled through her tears. Princess would like that, I think. She would, Mrs. Delacroix agreed. She always did love being the center of attention. 3 days later, Rue found herself back at the veterinary clinic, but this time for much happier reasons. Princess was back to being spoiled rotten, and Elena was completely smitten with her new kitten, Hope. She's perfect, Elena said, cradling Hope while Maya took photos. Look at that little face. Princess is doing wonderfully too, Mrs. Delacroix added. Back to her old self, demanding treats and posing for photos. She doesn't seem to remember any of her ordeal. Hope seemed completely unbothered by all the attention. She purred contentedly in Elena's arms, occasionally reaching up to bat at the old. The followers are going crazy for the updates, Maya reported, scrolling through the comments. People are so relieved about Princess and they're already in love with Hope. Look, so happy Princess is safe. And this one, welcome to the family, Hope. Rue watched from the corner of the examination room, Copper at her feet. Well, that had worked out better than expected. No handcuffs, no drama, just two sad women figuring out how to help each other. How are Elena and Hope doing? Jake asked, appearing in the doorway with Hope's vaccination records. Wonderfully, Mrs. Delacroix said. Elena has such a natural way with animals. Hope adores her already. Elena blushed. It's just practice. Duchess taught me a lot about patience, and Mrs. Delacroix has been so generous. She's paying for everything Hope needs. After they left, Rue and Copper walked down to the harbor. The spot where they'd found Princess now just looked peaceful. Boats bobbing gently, pelicans diving for fish, tourists taking photos. Well, detective, she said to Copper, who was investigating the same interesting smell he'd found there a week ago. "Our first case is officially closed. Not bad for a couple of amateurs." Copper looked up at her and wagged his tail once. "Don't let it go to your head," she told him. "We're still planning to be boring Florida transplants who mind our own business." Jake's truck pulled up beside them a few minutes later. "Taking a victory lap?" he asked, rolling down the window. "Something like that." Rue smiled. Princess is back to ruling her domain, and Elena's already completely smitten with Hope. Mrs. Delacroix is planning Hope's debut photo shoot to introduce her to Princess's followers. She is. It's nice to see them both smiling again. Jake looked like he wanted to say something else, then seemed to think better of it. "Well, I should get back. Mrs. Patterson's bringing in her iguana this afternoon." "An iguana? As a pet?" You'd be surprised how many people try to domesticate the ones in their backyard. This one apparently thinks it's a dog, follows Mrs. Patterson around, sleeps on her couch. Fair warning, don't try this at home. Most iguanas are not as cooperative. After he drove off, Rue and Copper headed back toward their cottage. The afternoon was getting warm, and she was looking forward to sitting on her screen porch with a cold drink and maybe actually unpacking another box or two. "You know," she said to Copper as they walked, "that wasn't completely terrible. Helping people, I mean. Even if it did involve more drama than I was planning on." Copper trotted beside her, occasionally stopping to investigate interesting smells, but always catching up. He seemed satisfied with how things had turned out, too. When they reached the cottage, Rue looked back toward town, where Princess was back to being an Instagram diva, and Elena was learning to love again with little Hope. Not bad for a week that started with a missing cat and a reluctant investigation. Not a bad outcome for a week that had started with a missing cat and a reluctant investigation. "Come on, partner," she said to Copper, opening the screen door. "Let's go see if we can figure out how to work the TV remote. That should be mystery enough for now."
Thank you for listening. Please visit me at winvalentine.com to stay up to date. Please subscribe, leave a comment, and review.